Hey everyone, Dr. Zio here again. It's been a minute, but I'm rested, recharged, and ready to go for our first video of 2024. That is none other than my episode 1 review for the newest Sentai on the block, Bakuage Sentai, BoonBoomger. I didn't like it. Did not like it, but we'll go into that here in just a second. As always, we're going to do our summary, likes, dislikes, and then our conclusion. So, there's not much going on in this episode of BoonBoomger, even though it's the premiere. But just to summarize exactly what's happening, we have Mira, our soon-to-be Pink Ranger, who's getting married to this mob boss, seemingly against her will. And in comes Taya, our Red Ranger, and a delivery man, apparently. And his job is to rescue Mira and then take her from point A to point B, which is an airport, so that she could actually be with her real boyfriend. Now, once Taya rescues Mira, there's a big chase that ensues with Taya and Mira in Taya's car, which looks pretty nice, and the abandoned groom and his posse, so to speak, in their cars. And that all gets interrupted by our villain faction, the Hashilians. They bust in, cause a ruckus, and then thankfully the Rangers are able to get away. Taya has Mira go ahead and change outfits. At that point, the villains come and they turn Mira's wedding gown into the monster of the week. And our monsters of the week are called auto monsters, whereas our mooks are called Neji letters. So at that point, a big old fight ensues between our Red Ranger Taya and the auto monsters and the Neji letters. And during this fight, we get a good morph sequence, and Taya calls in for backup from Chashiro, our Blue Ranger. He tells Chashiro to get Mira out of here and get her to the airport. But during that scene of Chashiro trying to get Mira to the airport, she decides, no, I'm actually going to stay and fight. So they go back to where the fight is, the two of them morph, and then we get a roll call. We get a big old fight between the Rangers and the Auto Monsters. They defeat the Auto Monster of the week, whose name was Gyausoline. I'm probably butchering up the pronunciation of that, but basically we get a fight, the Rangers win, the monster grows large, the Rangers win again in the Megazord, and then Mira dumps her boyfriend at the airport and says that she's dumping him to become a BoonBoomger, and we get an unceremonious end to the episode. So let's go ahead and talk about my likes for the episode. First things first, I really like Taya's car. Taya's car looks dope as hell. I also thought it was pretty funny when Taya and Mira in the car are being chased by the Hashilians, and they both come to a screeching halt to let somebody cross the road. There's a little bit of traffic safety that reminds you that this is a kid's show, and there are supposed to be those nice fun and comedic moments here. They also repeat this later on in the episode during the giant Megazord battle, and in the Megazord battle, instead it's the Zord stopping while traffic and like cars are passing, and then the Megazord battle continues. That was really good, 2 scenes of the same joke. I also really enjoy the morpher of the season. Here we have the Boon Boom Changer, which is basically a speedometer that can also attach to a wrist mount. And it looks cool. It's a little bit bulky. I'm not really a fan of that, but still, it's a really cool changer. I really like it. I'm honestly considering buying one. If y'all want me to buy one, you want me to review it, let me know in the comment section below, and I'll go ahead and do it because it's really not that expensive. But beyond that, the morpher looks cool. There was a real-time morph when Taya morphed for the first time, and it looked like the actor was actually in the BoonBoomger suit, and that was cool. I always appreciate real-time morphs, and I always appreciate seeing Rangers helmetless in the actual suits, even if it only lasts for less than a second here in the premiere episode. And speaking of the suits, I really like the suits. I don't like the helmets that much. It's going to take a while for that to grow on me, but the base suits themselves are really nice. I know I've seen other people compare them to, I think, track suits, racing suits, that kind of stuff, and it looks good. It looks really good. Initially, I didn't think I was going to even like the wheels on the ankles or wheels on the backs, but that's also growing on me. Even in the episode, Taya uses the wheels on the back in some sort of attack formation, I guess you could call it. Basically, the wheels turn CG. He uses his sword, gun, steering wheel. It's a myriad of items. It's a multi-tool, basically, of a weapon. And he uses it to control the wheels on his back in this giant CG form, kind of squish the monster. And I thought that was cool. It was a really unconventional way or unexpected way to use that little feature of the wheel, as well as using that feature on the suit, and props. Extra props if they use that more than once in the series. I also thought it was pretty nice that there's not that much CGI going on here in the fights. When there's not CGI, the fights are dope. When there is CGI, I don't like the fights. We'll get into that here in just a second. But yeah, coming from King Oger, where I stopped watching that show because of the god-awful CGI, I was just very happy to see that they're going in a completely different direction with this season, even if I'm not that fond of the season so far. But again, we'll get into that here in just a second. But all that to say, yeah, I appreciate practical effects and I appreciate what they're doing here with the fights, at least for the most part. The fight could still be better, but again, for what it is, I enjoyed it. Also, Mira and Chashiro having their own individual flares to the morph was nice. It has a little bit of personality, and I really enjoy that in Sentai or Power Ranger morphs or even Kamen Rider Henshins. In this episode, we see that Chashiro is kind of characterized as the cool guy who maybe is embarrassed easily. He doesn't really want to do the roll call after the morph, but he does it begrudgingly. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. The morph itself, cool. Chashiro, he's trying to play it cool. Meanwhile, Mira, she's having the time of her life. She's holding the morpher right in front of her, and she's smiling all throughout her morph. She's having an absolute blast becoming a BoonBoomger. And I feel like a lot of us can probably relate to that because probably a lot of us, we all grew up with tokusatsu in one shape or form, whether it was American tokusatsu or the authentic Japanese tokusatsu. We grew up with that stuff in one shape or form, and becoming a ranger, that's an exciting thing. It's always exciting to see somebody in the cast get really excited about becoming a ranger in that moment, because it just feels like they're the audience representative. And that's basically what Mira was here in this episode. She's kind of our view into this new world, this new season. I expect that to carry on into next episode as we're kind of introduced to more elements of the season, as well as their base and kind of what the status quo is going to be for the season going forward. I also found it funny that Chashiro did not want to do the roll call, but Bundorio, basically their little Megazord, well, their Megazord in mini form, was all about hyping them up to do the roll call. And of course, Mira was super excited to do it. And that's great. That's absolutely great. Mira even looked somewhat unsure of herself before starting up her portion of the roll call, but she got into it like that. And I was just, it's cool. It's really, really cool. I always love seeing it when Rangers aren't too sure of how to do the roll call or the morph at first, and then they get it, because it just adds a little bit more of a realistic element to everything, in that if you're freshly introduced to Rangerdom or Kamen Rider Dumb, and no one's really taught you the ins and outs of it all, you're not going to realistically know how to do the morph. You're not realistically going to know how to do the roll call, control all these elements of your suit, all that kind of stuff. So her picking up on the morph from when Taya did it, and then adding, and then, kind of playing along with the roll call was fantastic. Props to that. And then when the Rangers summon the Zords, they summon up, their cars. Basically, Bundorio turns into a giant bus, and he summons all the Zords, and they go into like this special highway thing, and which was interesting. It's all CGI. Kind of reminds me of Kira Major, but they all go into this highway thing as they're chasing after Yarukar, which is one of the villains of the season. It's like basically like a little toy car or a CGI car prop thing, and basically Yarukar absorbs the monster's essence after it's defeated, and then goes into this highway so that it can then in turn revive the monster as a giant, which it successfully does. But basically, Bundario, or Boon Boom, I think is what they called him in like the little press conference. Boon Boom basically he summons the cars into that little highway dimension, and then becomes like a giant bus himself. And then the Rangers in turn summon their own vehicles, Taya controlling Bundorio, and then Mira and Chashiro controlling their own Zords. And when they do the Zord summoning action, these Zords actually build up around them. And that sequence there looks fantastic. I would show it, but I don't, Toei is very stringent when it comes to sharing clips and that kind of stuff here on YouTube. I don't want to get banned. I'm not trying to get banned. I put too much work into this channel, so just gonna be a little bit lax on the clips, GIFs, and screenshots. My apologies there. But yes, that sequence looked dope. Also, when Chashiro and Mira were backing up into Bundorio to actually form the Megazord, there was like a little beeping noise, and I like that. Again, it's a little bit of flair that just reminds me of real life, and that just adds a little bit more to the series. The Zord itself looks great. Again, it's not CGI. There's an actual person in a suit fighting. The Zord fight looked dope. I didn't really like the finisher or the fact that they used, Chashiro's Zord's arm as a screwdriver. I thought that was really corny, but again, it's a kid's show, so I can't really fault it for that. But speaking of which, let's go ahead and talk about my dislikes for the episode. So speaking of which, I thought the episode as a whole was really boring. Like, the characters are boring. There's really not much to them. I mean, yes, Mira is a very excited person. I enjoy that, but not enough for me to keep watching. Taya seems to be the cool guy, which isn't all that interesting. Chashiro, also the cool guy, which isn't interesting. Bundorio, the hype man, which is, adds a bit of excitement to the season, but again, not interesting. The villains, the Hashilians, Yarikar, what are their names? Yarikar, Itasha, and Deco Trade. Again, not interesting. The villain suits, those are dope. I should have put that in my likes. Yeah, those villain suits are dope. The Mook suits are dope. All that's cool, but there's really not much going on in this premiere episode that's interesting to me. And I know that some people are going to say, well, yeah, it's the premiere. You got to let the show build up to interesting things. But I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that at all. Because this is the premiere episode of your, let's say, 47 to 50 episode season. You want to come in strong, okay? You want to introduce elements that are going to make people want to continue watching week after week from the jump. You don't want that viewership to drop because they're not interested in whatever product you have to show them week after week after week. Yes, there are some things I liked in this episode, but as a whole, it just doesn't come together. Those elements don't come together well. It's a very standard Sentai in the worst way. Even standard Sentais give you interesting characters or an interesting story, or both. And that's fantastic. Seasons like Deca Ranger may not have had an interesting story from the jump, or even much of a story at all. The story is pretty paper thin, if we're being honest. But Deca Ranger still had a fantastic cast to make up for that. Things like Gokaiger also had a fantastic cast, even if the underlying story of them trying to find all the Super Sentai's great powers was there. That element alone, yeah, it was okay, but it's really the characters that were driving it. And yes, there was also the whole Legendary Rangers aspect of it all, which is great, but if the characters themselves weren't interesting, I would not have been watching that. I loved them from day one, but with BoonBoomger, I don't really care about them. The characters aren't interesting, there's no story to be told here, and even the fights. There is a specific scene, and I will show a GIF here, I'll overlay it here, but there's a specific scene where Taya is fighting the Mooks, and he runs up this little wall tower thing, and that looked lame. That looked really, really bad, and I will sing to the high heavens. I will rant as long as I need to tell you that I don't like bad CGI. I know that Sentai and Japanese tokusatsu in general is known for its bad CGI, but it doesn't have to be. If you don't have good CGI to use, then don't use it. You can use practical effects. You can use a crane to levitate Taya up the wall. And it's been done before. Remember in Deca Ranger, Power Rangers SPD, during the Red Ranger's first fight, they had him descending down, what was that, a big old tower while he was shooting his gun, and that looked amazing, and that was done with practical effects. Switching over to Power Rangers, we've had Korag versus Claire. That was done with practical effects while they were fighting on the side of a mountain. Yes, that was done in a quarry, and doing these fights in a quarry does afford you more opportunities to give practical effects and do some crane work and all that kind of stuff. But we've seen in the past that they can do some sort of crane work within cities or industrial zones. It doesn't make sense why they couldn't have just switched this battle to an industrial zone. do the whole Sentai Tokusatsu jumping, and all of a sudden you're in a completely different area if they want to do this, stunt, so to speak. And I don't know. The season is not grabbing me so far. It's really not. You have to come strong with your premiere if you want to keep that audience and expect them to keep watching episode after episode after episode. I'm going to keep watching because I think there might be something there, but I'll give it maybe 10 episodes. If it's not interesting, I might drop it. I might not. So for now, in conclusion, while there are interesting parts to this episode, I think this is an overall failure of a premiere that doesn't really present interesting characters, a non-existent story so far, and just the sum of its parts just don't come together. The actual product is very mid, as the kids are saying these days, and there's just it's not good. It's very standard Sentai in the worst of ways. Actually, you know what? I do want to just read verbatim from what I've written down for the boring character section, because I think I wrote it better than I can actually just say off the top of my head. So let's go through with it. You can have a boring or even bad story as long as you have interesting characters. The Rangers here aren't interesting in the slightest. While I appreciate the perspective starting from Pink, that's not enough to really prop up this episode. The premiere fails to give us a sense of stakes or a reason for these characters to even fight. You can introduce characters and give us information about them while still maintaining a mystery and reason to delve deeper into their backstory. Take Dino Fury, for instance. The first episode does a remarkable job at introducing us to our core team of 3 Rangers, complete with who they are, how they arrived in Pine Ridge, except for Amelia because she's already there from the jump, and a believable reason for them to continue fighting. The Dino Fury production crew does all of this while still leaving plenty of room to explore their backstories later in the show's 2-season run, and interweave all of that into the core story itself. I have zero reason to believe that BoonBoomger will have a similar accomplishment. Like I said before, even Sentai has been successful in giving us paper-thin stories with interesting characters from their jump, so it's a wonder why BoonBoomger isn't able to do that here for its premiere episode. Another good example is Dawn Brothers. Dawn Brothers, again, had a paper-thin story that I tuned in week after week because the characters were just that good. We got a little bit of taste of them in that premiere episode. We also got the story from the one woman's perspective, that being Haruka, and it was fantastic. That premiere episode was great, and it kept me wanting more and more and more up until the finale. I still want more Dawn Brothers. I would take a season 2 in a heartbeat. Dawn Brothers is the proper way to give us paper-thin story with interesting characters, but BoonBoomger just doesn't accomplish that at all. But that's all the time we have for today. Again, I'm Dr. Zio. Thank you for watching. I do appreciate it. Or thank you for listening if you're listening to this on your favorite podcatcher. Whichever you are, I'm thankful. But as always, like the video, like the audio, rate it, comment, subscribe, do all those things. Share it too as well, because it does help with the YouTube algorithm and the algorithm around the internet. But otherwise, again, thank you for watching. Join me next week as we review BoonBoomger Episode 2. Otherwise, again, thank you for watching. I'm Dr. Zio, and I will see you all in the next one. Ciao.